Hello and welcome to our first week's review of the Bundesliga 2020-2021 season. So today we've got myself, Mark Broadhurst again, and our favourite guest as well, Rory. Hello, Rory.
Evening.
Perfect. So yeah, today obviously we're going to kind of review what happened during the week's events. Like the last game just finished a few hours ago from recording. So yeah, we're going to be just talking about the kind of main things that happened. So let's just start with a little quick run through the results this week. So obviously on Friday night, it was Bayern Munich 8, Schalke 0, which was kind of the big result really from the weekend. Then we have, Eintracht Frankfurt 1, Arminia Bielefeld 1, Werder Bremen 1, Hertha Berlin 4, which was another big result, Union Berlin 1, Augsburg 3, and FC Cologne 2, Hoffenheim 3.
Yeah, and the remaining 4 games. So Stuttgart lost 3-2 to Freiburg. Borussia Dortmund got off to a very good start, winning 3-0 at home to Gladbach. RB Leipzig won 3-1 this afternoon against Mainz, and the game that has obviously just finished in terms of just recording was Wolfsburg 0 by Leverkusen 0.
Okay, so let's just, I just want to bring your attention to a new little scheme we're going to be doing on this show. So we want to start off just to kind of get you guys involved, because obviously our viewers, our beloved viewers, are very important to us. We want to kind of get you involved as well. So we want to start with a little anagram. So what we're going to do at the start of every episode, we're going to start with an anagram of a famous Bundesliga club, manager, player. And what we want you to do is you guys have got to comment in the comment section after subscribing, of course. And then, we want you to see if you can get the right answers. And then at the start of next week, we're actually going to reveal the answer and see who was correct. So let's just put that on the screen now, and I'll leave it on for a few seconds and see if you can work it out. So the first one of this series is going to be Carve His Ink. So remember, it's got to be a Bundesliga player, manager, or a Bundesliga club. So let's see if any of you guys can get that one.
I am terrible at anagrams, so this will not be good for me.
It's not as easy as you think, you know. It's sometimes you think it's going to be really easy. I remember when we did the quiz as well for OTB, and they were really, really tough, the anagrams. A lot of people struggle. So let's see who of our followers can get this one. So I'm going to move that off. Okay, so let's get down to the main part of today's show. So obviously, the main thing we're going to be talking about is the main events that happened over the weekend between Friday and Sunday of this week. And I think there's only one place we can really start this week, to be honest. Obviously, the big results on Friday night, first game of the season. And I'm going to flash up that result now. Yeah, the Bayern 8, Schalke 0-4-0. Yeah. So let's start with you, Rory. What did you think about that game? Did you watch the game? What were your kind of overall feelings of that?
Yeah, so I caught good parts of the game, and yeah, I mean, what a start for the champions elect already. I feel like we mentioned last week that sometimes Bayern are slow starters. But we also mentioned that the first few fixtures looked quite presenting, and it turns out that I was quite presenting because they were in fine form on Friday night. Hat-trick for Serge Gnabry. Amazing to think that he was like a West Bromwich Albion reject, and now he's tearing it up for Bayern Munich in Bundesliga. So he was on fine form, especially his first goal. Like first touch, unreal, little Cruyff turn, and then first time finish straight after that. Absolutely fantastic. And then obviously there was the Robert Lewandowski. Would have been upset just scoring 1 out of 8 goals, probably. Knowing him, he probably would have wanted all 8. But he obviously managed to get in a Rabona flick of an assist. That was pretty special. But yeah, I mean, on the Schalke side of things, we've kind of highlighted last week as well that this is a team that, you know, they're a big team, but they've struggled massively last year. I mean, and that's not an ideal start, is it really? I mean, they really are going to be fighting for their lives, I think, this season. So yeah, very poor start for Schalke, and it looks ominous already for anyone else who wants to challenge Bayern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, just a few weeks or maybe a month or so on from destroying Barcelona 8-2, they're already into 8 figures again. So, well, 8 goals again. So it's just, I think, I mean, Bayern are just a team to beat at the moment in Europe, aren't they? And I think the Bundesliga is lucky to have them, really, although the teams facing them probably don't feel that way at the moment. I think another big talking point, obviously from an English perspective, I don't know if you saw this, but Jamal Musiala as well. The 8th goal was actually scored by him, making only his second league appearance by Bayern. And although he was actually born in Germany, he represents England due to the fact that he played most of his youth days at Chelsea. He was actually another Chelsea, one product of that Chelsea youth system. But Bayern doing what they do best, you know, and kind of getting these big name youngsters to the club and already on the score sheet. Yeah. Did you see much of him? Do you think he could be a promising guy for England in the future?
To be honest, I haven't seen much of him at all, but I had heard the name previously. However, it's great for him to get a bit of game time. A goal already will obviously be massive for his confidence. We've obviously already mentioned the presence of young English players in the league. Naturally, a lot of them are getting game time already. This first weekend goes to show that. Obviously, we'll talk more about other teams shortly, but other English players have had their say already this weekend. So it's an interesting trend to see, but obviously it's only going to be a positive thing for the English national team.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think obviously turning our attention to Schalke, I mean, it's just a disaster of a start. As you correctly said before, both of us tipped them to struggle. I think obviously David Wagner, I mean, we both said last week that we were a fan of his from his time at Huddersfield, but I mean, how long do you think he's got to turn it round? Because I mean, they finished the season atrociously at the end after lockdown last year in the last 10 games. And to start with an 8-0 defeat, I mean, surely his days have got to be pretty numbered now, Rory.
Yeah, I expect so. I guess there's only so long that you can live off, previous reputations, whether it's good or, how much credit you've got in the bank. Schalke, we've mentioned last week that they lost one of their better players in Weston McKennie, and he was playing in a struggling team, and they're minus him, struggling money wise. So I guess can the owners pull the trigger and let him go early? Like, I'm not entirely sure how much longer he's got left on his contract, but they'd obviously have to pay him off to get him out of the club anyway. So maybe they can't afford to do that. That might give him a bit more time. But I mean, going forward, if they don't pick up points soon, then yeah, he's going to be gone pretty quick.
Yeah, I think they've got a massive game next week at home against fellow early strugglers Werder Bremen, who again lost. We'll come a bit later onto that, but they lost once again. Yeah, I think if you look at the squad for Schalke as well, I mean, it's a shadow of Schalke sides in the past. I think they're really going through financial difficulties there. I think obviously, I mean, aside from Nabil Bentaleb, the former Spurs midfielder, there's not really any names really there that are kind of standing out to you. Really, I mean, they got Paciencia from who kind of had an okay season for Frankfurt last year, but it's not really enough to be kind of Schalke's talisman, really. And I think absolutely they're going to be in for a really long season this year, I think. Yeah. Okay, so let's, that's enough for that game, I think. So let's turn our attention now onto another big game facing two of last season's top four, actually, that you're going to see in the Champions League later on this season. And that was Dortmund versus Gladbach. And as you can see on the screen there, it was a comfortable home win for Dortmund, actually, this time. Yeah, with Haaland getting a couple, and obviously highly rated youngster Reina also chipping in with the goals too. Yeah, Rory, did you see much of that one?
Yeah, again, saw a decent amount of this game. Obviously, kind of tabled as being quite a tight game. Gladbach, obviously, kind of living off the top four riches of being back in the Champions League. Kind of expected a bit more from them. They were kind of disappointing in the game. Borussia Dortmund kind of knew what they were doing. And as you mentioned, the young American Gio Reyna was really bright. Obviously, kind of made his impact on the game. Won the penalty that Haaland then converted. Sancho then obviously proceeded to set up Haaland on the break for their third goal. So that front three is obviously really exciting. The longer it goes on, the better that Dortmund will do in the league table. I think there was one possible moment of controversy where Gladbach were potentially robbed of a penalty. So I think the score at the time was 2-0. So bit of VAR controversy, but we're used to that. Can't get very far without talking about VAR. So yeah, Dortmund very impressive. They're going to have to carry on that sort of form to be anywhere near Bayern, of course. But obviously on paper, a really difficult start to the season. But they passed that test with flying colours.
Yeah, I think one of the surprises for me about the weekend regarding Gladbach was the fact that Marcus Thuram started the game on the bench. Actually, obviously he was like a talisman last season, and also Alassane Pléa as well, who was also a very key player for them. Both started on the bench this game. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I think that could have been partly to do with the reason why Dortmund won with such ease this game, because Gladbach were kind of shorn of some of the best players as well. Yeah. And Rory, would you expect Gladbach to kind of bounce back in the coming weeks, or do you think that last season might have been just a one-off, really?
No, I expect Gladbach to come good. Sometimes it can be tricky, especially with this very interrupted and strange pre-season that a lot of teams have encountered. As you mentioned, Thuram and Pléa were really, they were shining lights for Mönchengladbach last season. So whether they were short of match, sharpness, that's maybe why the managers made the decision. Again, I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but in a game like this, maybe he's leaving them to be fresher for better games to come, where the points might be easier to collect. Is maybe one theory. But yeah, I think in the coming weeks, Gladbach will kind of get up and going. It's not easy going away to a top 4 team as your first game of the season, especially a team like Dortmund anyway. So I'm sure they'll come good in due course.
Yeah, absolutely. I would expect much of the same there, yeah. And obviously from an English perspective as well, 2 English players starting the game for Dortmund as well. I mean, obviously Sancho, one of them, not so much of a surprise, but Jude Bellingham as well, getting a really nice start there in a big game as well. I mean, we mentioned last week that it's really good that the German teams, they don't wait around to start these young talents. Once they get hold of them, they're straight in there, straight into the first team, and it's kind of like a sink or swim kind of situation, really. But more often than not, they seem to be swimming these days, which is great, isn't it, from an England perspective? Did you make much of his performance on Saturday?
Yeah, well, I've tracked him a lot already during pre-season, and obviously in the DFB Pokal first round, in which he scored. So the signs are promising already ahead of him getting the nod. Might have surprised a few at a very young, tender age, but as the old saying goes, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So I think he did a very good job, very accomplished in there. He'll be pleased to be playing with a fellow Englishman in the form of Sancho. So obviously we could see yet another young English talent flourish in the Bundesliga, and I'm sure as time goes on, the more he gets used to the pace of the league and the physicality. Obviously, he's a big lad anyway, so I'm sure he'll do really well.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next key game that we wanted to talk about today, which was actually a Baden-Württemberg derby as well, over in Stuttgart, which was actually Stuttgart 2, Freiburg 3. Quite a bit of a classic, really. I'm not sure whether most people would have had that down as so much of an entertaining game, but yeah, I mean, it's 2 cities that are really, really close to each other. Quite a big rivalry down there in Baden-Württemberg. Yeah, I think both of us had these. Well, I had both of these two teams to be down in the bottom 4 or 5 actually this year. But maybe judging on what was an entertaining game, both sides probably looked a bit better than what we would have imagined. Yeah, I mean, especially Freiburg after losing quite a lot of key players. I had them down as third from bottom in prediction, but maybe I'll have to review those predictions after a really, really good away victory. Yeah. Did it surprise you that Freiburg managed to get that win, Rory?
I mean, I thought it was going to be a close game, and obviously with Stuttgart having, obviously a very prestigious history and background in the Bundesliga, but they've got a very young team at the same time. So I was expecting Freiburg to win this, and when I saw that they went 3-0 up within about 50 odd minutes, I was quite worried for what the score might end up. So obviously on that hand, credit to Stuttgart for pulling it back late on and getting a couple of goals. And having seen the highlights of the game, I mean, Stuttgart will be disappointed not to have taken anything from that game because they had a lot of chances and they weren't clinical enough to take them. There was 2 goal line clearances, one for either team. So obviously there was a lot of goals anyway, and it could have been an even larger score in theory. So yeah, it was a really good game. Freiburg will take a lot of credit from it. An away win is always important, and that gets them off to a good start. But as a promoted team, and being 3-0 down so early doors, Stuttgart can take a lot of confidence from how they responded and in general how they played.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats from that game, 26 shots and only 7 on target from Stuttgart, whereas Freiburg's 7 shots and 6 on target. And obviously one of them was off the line as well. So that's what you call clinical finishing, I think, from Freiburg, really. Also, they scored 3 goals away from home with only 35% possession as well. I mean, it's pretty impressive, to be honest. I think, obviously, they managed to keep the main striker from last season, Niels Petersen. And I mean, I think obviously they lost a lot of key players with Koch going to Leeds as well, who's started pretty poorly, to be honest with you. But I mean, so maybe he wasn't as much of a loss as what people thought. Obviously, Kolov as well going to Hertha Berlin, the goalkeeper. But I mean, they did do well to keep Niels Petersen as well, because he banged in, I think, like 13, 14 goals for them in their successful season last year. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's going to be something big for them. Yeah. And Rory, do you think Stuttgart might be able to bounce back in the coming weeks, or do you think it's going to be more of the same for them going forward?
I mean, it's going to be a tough couple of weeks to get used to Bundesliga level of football again for the team. As mentioned, they're a young side, and learning is very much part of the game at that age. Having said that, you need to learn your lessons quickly, or else you'll find yourself adrift at the bottom. Obviously, having already seen their fellow promotion team Bielefeld get obviously a really important point, which we'll obviously go over in a little while, that immediately puts on pressure for them. So in the games to come, naturally they'll want to improve on. Conceding 3 at home is never good. So let's hope that they can respond. We never want a drab relegation race where one team is, adrift at the bottom. I'm sure Stuttgart will come good and get a couple of points soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, like performance-wise, it wasn't a bad performance at all. I guess it was just a case of Freiburg being really, really prolific with the finishing, and I think obviously it wasn't a bad performance to start off with. So I think there are definitely positives it can take from that game. Yeah,
indeed.
Okay, so let's move on to our next key game this week, and it was another entertaining 5-goal thriller, which also resulted in an away win. And it was Werder Bremen versus Hertha Berlin. As you can see on the bottom there, it was a Hertha that came away with the spoils with a really, really impressive 4-1 victory away at Werder. I mean, I know I tipped up Hertha Berlin, maybe to some people's surprise quite a lot, so I'm going to celebrate that one, as a bit of a victory for myself. I mean, we don't know whether it's going to continue for Hertha, but I mean, it's a damn good start, I would say, yeah. Obviously, Werder Bremen, awful last season. They would have been hoping to get off to a nice, strong home start this year. But, I mean, it's been quite the opposite, really, Rory, anything stand out for you in that game?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I was kind of saying last week that after Werder Bremen's fantastic escape from relegation, I was expecting them to, do quite well this season. So that's that's not made me look tremendously good in that regard. But yeah, obviously very disappointing from Werder's point of view. Obviously from a standpoint of a Man United fan, it was interesting to see Tadic Chong get a start. I think he got pulled after 60 minutes, so not an ideal start for him. And then Hertha, obviously, they look really strong. Very impressive performance. Obviously, new signing John Cordoba getting on the score sheet as well for them, which will please the fans. So obviously, as you've mentioned, Mark, perhaps to some people's surprise, can Hertha then push on to challenge for Europe, or perhaps certainly a top 6 or 7 finish could be on the cards, because they impressed.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you look at their attacking talent nowadays, I mean, who would have thought 2 or 3 years ago that a Hertha Berlin team would have Piatek, Luca Bacchio, Cordoba? It's looking like a side that's starting to mean business now. I mean, I had them in my top 5, and I don't see any reason why to go against that. I mean, obviously in defence as well, guys like Dedrick Boyata as well had a solid game too there. I mean, a guy that came from Man City also played at Celtic and was pretty high. I know Paul, obviously one of our writers, he highly rates Boyata as well from his time at City. I think Celtic fans would agree as well. Another solid signing there at the back. Obviously getting the goalkeeper from Freiburg, which we've already mentioned, Svolov, another good signing. I mean, it looks a real good side, yeah. I think obviously, again, if you look at Werder as well, I mean, Tahith Chong pulled after 60 minutes. Bit of a disappointing performance in some ways. It could have been partly to do with his fitness. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to hope that he'll get another start next week again, but you never know really with Werder at the moment. But I mean, if you look at the stats from the game, they were very, very even. I mean, both sides had 6 shots on target. The possession was just slightly in the favour, 56% in favour of Hertha Berlin. Yeah, I think Rory, do you think in the Bundesliga a lot of it, like with some of these mid-table kind of teams, do you think a lot of it just comes down to like kind of clinical finishing and like key moments like that?
Yeah, very much so. The very nature of, or very definition of a mid-table team is that kind of difference between being clinical in front of goal and, and that level of consistency. I guess that's why teams end up being in that, kind of battle in the middle of the table, because you either haven't got the squad depth or the quality to be up there. So that's not obviously a huge surprise. Obviously, Werder, they've got some good players. Obviously, Davy Klaassen played at the weekend as well, former Everton player. Obviously, didn't have the best time there. And then Leo Bittencourt as well. I think he came on as a sub. So interested to see why he didn't start, because he was one of their best players post lockdown. So he maybe if he gets fit, he can start to push them a little bit further up the league. But yeah, interesting to see how they'll get on.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also surprised to see the Bittencourt. I can only imagine it was a fitness issue, because I think he only signed like 10 days ago, so maybe he didn't have a very good pre-season. But he's a really key player for them. Obviously signed from Hoffenheim. Quite a bit of a coup, really, some would say, because I think a lot of people expected him to go and slip back into that Hoffenheim side as well. Another good signing, another good performance from Hertha Berlin as well was Matheus Cunha as well. I think a really, really good signing, attacking midfield, very, very pacey, technical player. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm really liking the look of this Hertha side. I do think it's realistic they could even push on for the top 4, realistically, to be honest. I think exciting times though for Hertha. Obviously, Berlin never really had a kind of top club in Germany for many, many years. And I think this could be the time now they can really kind of start pushing on and establish themselves as one of Germany's top clubs, definitely. Okay, so let's go on to the last of our feature games, which was another 5-goal thriller, which again ended up in an away win. So let's pull that one up. So it's Cologne versus Hoffenheim, which ended up in a last-minute Andrej Kramaric hat-trick 3-2 win. Obviously, I think the big talking point from that one, Andrej Kramaric missed a lot of last season. He's been a real talisman and an excellent player for Hoffenheim over the last 4 or 5 years. Kind of replaced Firmino when he went to Liverpool as well. Very key player for them. Another hat-trick. Yeah, I saw him a couple of years ago at Nuremberg as well when they played over here. And I was really, really impressed with him. And obviously, unfortunately, last season plagued with injuries, but back again this year with a brilliant hat-trick, really. Yeah. Did you see much of this one, Rory?
I saw some of it, yeah. Yeah, obviously Kramaric has, has done really well since joining Hoffenheim, and probably won't look back too fondly at his time at Leicester City. But yeah, obviously a hat-trick on opening day, you can't get much better than that, especially with his third goal being in injury time to win the 3 points for his side. Obviously, really important goal for the team wanting to get off, to a flyer. One of the teams that I've tipped to do quite well in terms of finishing in the top 6. So that was obviously really important for themselves. One player that I was kind of looking at a little bit was Baumgartner. He's a young player that has impressed and looks good. So he started that game as well. So hopefully he can link up with Kramaric and they can form a formidable partnership going forward for the side. Obviously from Cologne's point of view, they'll be disappointed in the fact that they probably thought that they had scrambled a point from the game with I think it was Drexler's late goal, but obviously ultimately they got stung right at the end by Kramaric's quality. So yeah, really good game. Kramaric on fire. Very impressive stuff from Hoffenheim.
Yeah, I think it's always gutting for teams when they get a late level and then end up conceding even later as well. It's I think obviously I had Cologne down as a relegation fodder this year, but I do think one big kind of positive point in the last few days for Cologne was the signing of Sebastian Andersson from Union Berlin as well. I think obviously he was like the talisman for Union last year, and I think not only is it a great signing for Cologne, but I think it's a big blow for Union as well, who, as we'll say later, didn't have the best of starts to the season and have kind of been stripped of the best talent from last year. Yeah, I think Andersson is a really, really good kind of he's a kind of a poacher, but also a battering ram at the same time. Like he's the kind of guy who just seems to be in the right place at the right time. Big physical centre forward who really impressed me last year for Union. Got the goal, which got them the first leveler in this match, but then obviously still not quite enough. Yeah, I do have concerns about the defence for Cologne as well. I mean, they shipped so many goals. Yeah, Rory, did the Cologne defence impress you much on Saturday?
No, not as such. No, I know obviously they've got a veteran goalkeeper in net in the shape of Horn, but I mean I think he's a pretty steady goalkeeper. But obviously ultimately, conceding 3 on opening day at home again, that's a poor start by any stretch. And if they are going to be nearer to the bottom of the table this season, struggling, then the defence ultimately is going to be an issue. And if they can't sort that out, then they're going to be in big trouble. So yeah, I think they could be struggling this season if they don't sort that out.
Yeah, I mean, going forward, there is quality. We've mentioned Andersson, but also Duda as well, as signing from Hertha Berlin, was obviously in replacement from Cordoba, who went the other way. But I think I saw him play at Nuremberg a couple of years ago, and I think he got a double that day. And I was a little bit surprised to allow Hertha Berlin to let him go. I guess they probably consider that they've got better there now, but I mean, he was still a solid player if you want to kind of challenge for the season. But yeah, I think he is a positive signing for Cologne. But whether it'll be enough, I don't know, because we've already seen that the defensive problems are huge. I mean, they've not really managed to plug the gaps from last season. I think, for me, they're still down as like kind of relegation fodder, really. But we'll have to see over the next few weeks what's going to happen. Okay, so that's the end of our featured games today. But let's just touch quickly over the other 4 games which happened over the weekend. So yeah, let's. What about Frankfurt 1, Arminia Bielefeld 1? So obviously a really nice away point against Frankfurt for Bielefeld. Both of us tipped Bielefeld to really struggle. Yeah, Rory, do you think that gives them a bit of hope going forward?
Yeah, I think massively, especially after they had a disappointing result in the DFB Pokal, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. But it sounded like it was a bit of a scrappy game. And of course, when Bielefeld managed to get the lead, that's something for them to, to cling on to for dear life. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do it for the full 90, and Frankfurt got a bit of a scrappy equaliser in the end. Obviously, not an ideal start for Frankfurt from their point of view. Home to a recently promoted team. You'd expect to collect 3 points from that, and then from the point of view of Arminia, that's a fantastic point to collect. Just gets you off the mark, gets you rolling, especially like when you're newly promoted to a new league, new standard of football. Always the first thing is massively about confidence, and taking a point from that against a good team away in the Bundesliga is always difficult. So they'll be really pleased with that, and hopefully they'll give them a bit of confidence going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. And the next other game we're going to talk about is Union Berlin 1, Augsburg 3. I think I tipped Union to do well this season, but obviously losing Anderson as well, they have had the side kind of stripped from last season. A couple of late goals there for Augsburg, a team quite near to where I'm based as well, so I kind of root for them a little bit, Augsburg. I think, good result for them, obviously, after losing a few key players as well. Yeah, can you see, what about Union, Rory? Can you see them struggling again from now on?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the highlights from the game, and one thing that I picked out was that two of Augsburg's goals were headed goals. Whether that's a bit of a freak thing, and there was just opportune moments in a particular game, but Union obviously need to sort themselves out. They were on point potentially. To collect a point, get a draw, and that's not too bad starting off. And then, as you mentioned, the 2 late goals have done them. So that's obviously disappointing from their point of view. Fair play to Augsburg. I think I mentioned them last week as potentially struggling this season. Shout out to Daniel Framberger, who assisted the first goal for Vargas. Absolute fantastic efforts across the ball, and he was kind of chasing it to make sure it didn't go out of play. Managed to whip in an absolutely delicious cross, which Vargas basically couldn't miss with his head. So fair play to Augsburg, very impressive and very good start for them.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a pretty solid Augsburg team, really. I think maybe on the back of that, they've always been a decent home side, but I mean, it's always been about kind of converting those into away wins. Some key players like Florian Niederlechner, I mean, I really like him as well. A good kind of like strong centre forward. Vargas as well gives them a bit of pace and quality. Seems as though they've got a bit of quality at the fullbacks as well. Obviously, after losing Philip Max last year, which was a big loss at fullback, I mean, Framberger could be their kind of new star now. You don't know. And obviously, they've signed Iago as well, which is a kind of a nice bit of flair there at fullback. Yeah, the next one I just want to mention is obviously last season's top 4 team, RB Leipzig 3, Mainz 1. I think not really any shocks there. Yeah, Rory, anything that stood out for you there, really?
No, not a major standout. Was watching it today. RB looked too good for Mainz. Shout out probably to Daniel Olmo. He kind of ran the show, really impressive from midfield. 2 assists in a really solid performance. So he could be the difference as has been mentioned in an article I've done recently for the Over the Bar website. So hopefully he'll kind of continue to progress as we go forwards. I mean, mine's very little kind of threat going forwards. Mateta took his goal really well, so that was a positive for them. Obviously, they were briefly in the game, but ultimately not good enough for a quality RB side.
Yeah, I think one of the other big talking points from that game is the fact that Marcel Sabitzer as well, one of probably their key player from last season, aside from maybe Timo Werner. He was on the bench that game, but he didn't actually come off the bench. Yeah. And any shocks there, Rory? Maybe a potential transfer away from the club?
Yeah, I mean, that's really strange. He's obviously one of the key leaders in the squad for RB. So when I saw him that he wasn't playing and then obviously didn't come on, that was a bit of a shock. I haven't seen any teams that have been linked with him or anything concrete. So whether there is something going on there, you'd have to, be able to look into the rumours a bit more. But he's obviously a quality player. So whether it was just maybe an injury or something else, you never know.
Absolutely, yeah. Then obviously the final game, which was rounded off what had been a really good week of games, actually, with a really shocking game, to be honest with you. By far the worst game of the week, both in terms of goals and in terms of quality, really, which is a bit of a shock because before the game you'd have thought it would have been one of the best of the weekend. But yeah, Wolfsburg 0, Leverkusen 0. Yeah. Rory, did you see much of that one?
Yeah, there were some parts that I saw, and I think what summed it up perfectly was that the commentator mentioned that out of all the outfield players, the referee was the best player on the pitch. So yeah, I think take that from what you will. Couple of chances here and there. I think Wolfsburg actually hit the post from a corner, but that is literally as close as we came to any real excitement in that game. Yeah, very poor and unexpected with those two quality teams, but I'm sure they'll both bounce back and be back in the goals soon.
Yeah, I think it's kind of typical in many ways because obviously, last week I was going on about how much Leverkusen was scoring under Peter Bosch and stuff, and then they serve up that kind of performance. Commentators curse, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's the end of our week roundup of matches. But I just want to move on now to the predictions for next week. So one thing that me and Rory want to kind of do over the next season is we want to kind of do the predictions and see how we fare up against each other. So if you want to leave a few comments on who you think's going to win, whose knowledge you think is most up to scratch, then feel free to do it. But yeah, we're going to be starting that from the next set of fixtures. Yeah. So I just want to kind of touch on what our predictions are for next week, and obviously what we feel about some of these games. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the first 4, and then Rory's going to go through the second 5. So let's start with Hertha Berlin v Frankfurt. I've gone for 2-0 home win for Hertha. I just think they've got too much quality there for Frankfurt, really, who are a pretty drab side, or all in all, really. I think I'm going to go with my boys Hertha for a 2-0 win. And Rory?
Yeah, agreed. I've gone 3-1 Hertha Berlin. Yeah, I think they'll have way too much for Frankfurt.
Yeah. And the next game is Gladbach versus Union. I think I've actually gone for, some might see this as a surprise, but I've gone for a 1-1 draw there, actually. I've just got a funny feeling that Union, they might just go back to their old school defensive style. And obviously Gladbach just starting a little bit slowly. I think they're going to get a 1-1 draw there.
I have gone 1-0 Mönchengladbach. I think obviously despite a poor start, they'll be able to bounce back, and maybe Thuram or Plie will back themselves a goal.
Yeah, then the next game, Leverkusen v RB Leipzig. This is probably the big game of the next week. I've gone for a 2-1 home win for Leverkusen. I just think Leverkusen, they kind of pick up the game for these big encounters. So I'm going to go for a home win there.
Ironically, I've gone 2-1, but I've gone 2-1 the opposite way. So I'm backing RB to get an away win. Obviously, they're not really been tested this weekend. So I reckon that they'll turn up and be able to get a big win on the Saturday.
Yeah. Then the next one is Mainz v Stuttgart. I've gone for a 2-2 draw there, actually. I think they're two pretty open sides. They don't really struggle to score goals, but they struggle to keep them out at the other end. I think a game that both sides will want to win, but I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw there.
Yeah, I have gone one goal apiece. So yeah, I also agree that it will be a draw. Obviously, Stuttgart will want to get on the board, and might be with fellow strugglers potentially the season in mind. So yeah, 1-1, I reckon.
Okay.
Okay. So Mark's just covered the first four there. So going into the final 5 games of next weekend. So we've got FC Augsburg versus Borussia Dortmund, and I have gone for a 4-1 victory for Borussia. Just at the moment, the way that Dortmund has started, look on fire, exciting going forwards. Augsburg, obviously, I think they'll get the odd goal perhaps, but yeah, I reckon Dortmund will win that one comfortably. Mark, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I've gone for a 3-1 Dortmund win, actually. They're almost the same on this one. But yeah, I agree with Rory. I just think like Dortmund have just got too much attacking power. I think obviously Augsburg a good solid start this weekend, but I think this is maybe a bridge too far for them.
Okay, next up we have Arminia Bielefeld versus FC Cologne, and I have gone for an away win, 2-1. Just think the new boys might struggle a little bit, and I reckon FC Cologne might be able to bounce back and get an important victory on the road. So, Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, these are the two sides that I predicted to go down automatically. So I guess I had to go for a draw really there. Yeah, so I've gone for a 1-1 draw. Can't really see this being too entertaining. I think it's another game that Bielefeld probably feel like they have to win this, and they might just want it too much. I can see a late equaliser for Cologne in this one.
Yep. And then moving on to the evening kickoff on the Saturday, which is Schalke hosting Werder Bremen. Both sides are, struggling a wee bit. So I have actually gone for an away win again. 2-1 to Werder. I reckon Schalke, I just feel like are in absolute free fall at the moment. And hopefully United boy Tadic Chong can perhaps have a bit more of a positive impact on his side next week. So 2-1 Werder. Mark, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think this is probably the hardest one to tip of them all because the two sides are just, I mean, they just don't seem to be able to get any form together at all. But I've gone for home advantage. I think it's one of those games where I just think Schalke, I mean, I really can't see this one being a very good game, to be honest with you. It's a big game. It's two big clubs that really need a result. Yeah, but I'm going to go for a 1-0 Schalke win there.
Okie doke. And then moving on to Sunday's games, we've got Hoffenheim hosting Bayern Munich. So I have predicted a high-scoring game, and it will be a 4-2 victory to Bayern Munich. I mean, doesn't really take much explaining why I've gone first head result. Hoffenheim obviously, look good this weekend. Maybe Kramaric can get back on the score sheet again. But yeah, not enough to beat this Bayern Munich team at the moment. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've gone for a similar result as well. I can see it being a really entertaining game, this one. I think Hoffenheim are a really good attacking side, but I just can't see them having the defensive power to keep Bayern out. I can't see anyone having the defensive power to keep them out at the moment. So I've gone for a 4-1 win for Bayern.
Very good. And then the last game of the weekend, which will be, again, an evening kickoff, is going to be Freiburg versus Wolfsburg. So I have gone for a surprise, potentially home win for Freiburg. Obviously, having just watched the Wolfsburg game, they didn't really look too potent going forwards, and they were quite wasteful. And then being on the road, that they might struggle. So yeah, I've gone with a home win. Mark, what have you gone for in this one?
Yeah, again, I think this one could be quite good, an interesting game. I think it's two sides who, I mean, obviously Wolfsburg, maybe not the best performance, but it's a decent result to draw at home to Leverkusen, I think. But I think I'm going to go for a 2-1 Wolfsburg win. I think last season Wolfsburg were a solid away side, actually. They got a few wins against those kind of mid-table sides away from home. And I don't see any reason to think that they won't get a similar kind of result this time as well. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Wolfsburg win there.
Excellent stuff. Well, that's all the predictions done for next weekend's fixtures. Obviously, as Mark has mentioned, we're going to be tracking these throughout the season. So hopefully, you guys can join in as well and comment, or join potentially a league that we can start up. So just to have a bit of fun with it all. So that's the predictions for this week going forward.
Yeah. And obviously, I think Rory wants to add a few words as well about the DFB Pokal, which happened in midweek as well. Obviously, this is mostly a Bundesliga show, but I think Rory just wants to add a few points on that as well.
Yeah, so just a bit of interesting information. Obviously, we are the Bundesliga show for Over the Bar, but we still like to encompass as much information as we can. So just looking back to round 1 of the DFB Pokal, so that's the German National Cup. We've seen a couple of interesting shocks. So Arminia Bielefeld will be absolutely buzzing with a point from this weekend, but they obviously are just are on the receiving end of a very embarrassing result, being knocked out by fourth division side in the form of Ezen. So that was not a good result for Arminia. Other than that, there was one very exciting game where Hertha Berlin were on the receiving end of a 5-4 defeat to second division Braunschweig. So they are also out in the first round. Obviously, the DFB Pokal is a cup that often throws up quite a lot of shocks. So there's 2 big ones already. Mark, do you think the DFB Pokal can throw up even more shocks in the next round?
Yeah, I think typically there's always a lot of shocks in that competition early on, because I think the German league, they don't really like midweek games. So I think a lot of the managers kind of have the mentality that, okay, unless we kind of scramble our way through to the last 16, last 8, there's not really much point really, because I think obviously most of the money, just like in the Premier League, most of the money is in staying in the Bundesliga or qualifying for European competition. So I think that's how you can explain some of the crazy results with Bielefeld as well. I mean, I think Hertha Berlin will be disappointed with that, because I think they are the kind of side that have got the strength and depth to challenge on more than one front this year. So, I mean, obviously it was a bit of a crazy game up there in Braunschweig, but I still think they'll be disappointed, that's for sure. But I think Bielefeld, it was more of a relief than anything, to be honest, because, I mean, obviously they got the result they wanted this weekend. They'd have wanted a strong start, a solid point away from home. So I think, I think overall they'd rather have lost that game and got a point this weekend rather than beaten Essen and lost to Frankfurt, to be honest with you.
Indeed. And then just a couple more bits, more off cuff. So we've got a random fact that we're going to try and pull as much as we can. And so this week's random fact has come from the BBC, an article that kind of told the story of a German football team that lost 37-0 to their local rivals after only fielding 7 players who socially distanced themselves throughout the match. So this is a very odd one. I picked up on the BBC this week just gone by. So the team that were on the receiving end were called Ripdorf. So they fielded a minimum number of 7 players on a Sunday afternoon because their opponents that they were playing that in that particular game had come into contact with a team whose player had tested positive for COVID-19. And so obviously there hadn't been enough time, say the 2-week period, which is being stated really with coronavirus recoveries. So they were refusing to play, but were made to play by their local football association. So just decided to throw the towel in. So that is a very random one. You would have thought maybe if they were socially distancing themselves, there might have been more than 37-0. I feel like they've managed to do quite well there for a 90-minute stint of avoiding the football. Maybe the opposition felt a bit sorry for them, but that is the random fact of the week. And then just one other thing to touch on briefly was the real positive aspect to see crowds back in stadiums this weekend in the Bundesliga. Mark, do you think that's, I mean, obviously that's a good thing in terms of revenue for clubs, but do you think that will have an impact, say, on home teams being able to get some fans in? impact on results, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the numbers aren't really significant enough to kind of change results. You know, I mean, I think to realistically have a big impact on results, you need like full stadiums, really. You know, I think not just a few thousand fans, really. But I think it's a great step in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, I hope England can do the same in a couple of weeks. Really, I think obviously I myself and someone that likes to get to the stadium at FC Nuremberg as well. Obviously, they're in the second division, but I'd be very much looking forward to getting back into the Max Morlock Stadium over in Nuremberg. Yeah, I mean, the Bundesliga atmosphere is a second to none. To be honest with you, I'd recommend anyone who has the chance to get down to a German game, whether it be Bundesliga or Zwei Bundesliga. I very much recommend getting down, like cheap tickets, really, really nice atmosphere, friendly atmosphere too. I think I'm really, really happy to see the crowds are getting back in. Although I do think it'll take at least a year and a half to get full crowds back again, unfortunately.
Very good. Well, I think that wraps things up. So, Mark, do you want to tell our lovely viewers about how to get involved with more over the bar content?
Absolutely, yes. So obviously we always like to sign out with a little reminder of how to follow us in more detail. Yeah. So remember that you can access us on Twitter, which I'm going to stick on the bottom of the screen now. Yeah. As you can see, @OverTheBarFB. Yeah. We have a lot of new information and updates on there. And then also we have the website as well, which is www.otbfootball.net, where we have a lot of not only video information as well, but we also have a lot of writing, which actually Rory did a really, really good piece on the Bundesliga, some of the top 6 players to watch over the next year, which obviously as a Bundesliga fan, I personally found really interesting. So yeah, get it read, get it liked, and obviously subscribe to our channel. We were really, really happy with the turnout for our first episode. We want to keep going. Obviously, we're both very passionate about the Bundesliga, and we want to kind of inform you guys as well as possible. So yeah, so thank you again for joining us, and yeah, it was really nice to discuss the points again with you, Rory, today. So thanks again, and yeah,
my pleasure.
We'll see you all again next week, and yeah, let's hope I win the predictions this time. Yeah.
Cheers all.
Bye bye, guys.